Greetings, gamers. It's Tim here again. And if you want to say you look like crap, please, I understand. I feel you. That's what I feel like. Um, I had COVID. I was released from isolation, meaning I could leave my house and do stuff in theory on the 12th of December. Um, and then I was good the next week. And this week I got hit with something else, probably the flu, because I haven't had the flu in 20 years. They're all encouraging me to get a flu shot. I'm like, I haven't had the flu in 20 years. You know I haven't had the flu in 20 years? Because I don't get the flu shot. Because I can almost guarantee you if you give me a flu shot for virus strain 937, I will get the next strain over, at 98 or even 99 or, 10,000, something. But um, like, oh, you should get a flu shot. No, no, I really shouldn't. Because I have not had the flu since I stopped getting flu shots. Um, Unless this is it for once. I don't know. COVID was fairly mild to me compared to what this is. So I hope it's not an extenuation of the COVID after isolation or a reinfection. Because I've read some things that I'm not sure have been confirmed or not, that it is something you can get reinfected with. And unfortunately, I live in Texas, and Texas is really horrible about enforcing the laws to masks. And there have been times when I've just walked into a store and walked out because there were so many people in there that were not masked. And it cost them sales because I came in for like 13, 14, 30 change, expensive stuff like medications or other things because I can't, I'm not someone who can go in shopping really easily. So if I've got the energy and feel good enough to go in shopping, that says something for me being able to go to that store because it's probably where I'm going to get most of my stuff. Of course, now we have grocery delivery and I don't have to, which helps. But my social anxiety it's just funny because my social anxiety has finally reached a level where I could mostly deal with it. Not always, but mostly. As long as I avoid certain stressful situations, like going into stores of a certain kind. Uh, but yeah, so when I walk in and, half the people aren't masked or they're wearing their masks under their nose, and I'm like, I'm out. And I still got COVID. But, and I mask. I wear a mask because I don't want somebody else to get that disease. Because even though I had a mild case, it's not free of some misery. And now I'm sick again. And it's not fun. Not fun to be sick. It's not fun to be sick at Christmas. Not that we're going anywhere this year because of COVID, but still, um, it's kind of the thought to be hopefully able to do that again someday with family. People who I'm mostly comfortable with, mostly. Right now, I'm drinking uh, green mint tea, and after a certain government department hit our house with cleaning flu. And cleaning crew, because my mom is just a tiny bit of a hoarder. And after my dad died, she didn't get rid of any of his clothes, any of his stuff. Didn't even donate it. She kept talking about it, but we were going on that as of this year, we were going 8 years since his death, and none of it has happened. And I've done what I could, but I can't be the one responsible for choosing what things of my dad stays and what goes, because she wants to keep it for making a quilt or something memory bears or something. But so it's kind of like I've been fighting that fight, and finally the government stepped in and took it. But we kind of got a crew that I don't think are entirely on the up and up, and apparently they're not insured. So if for some reason a certain government agency says you need to clean the inside of your house for your health or something, which is what they did to my mom, you know, it's make sure that they have a bonded company who's doing it. Because this company, you know, I mean, we're pretty sure they just took stuff home. Uh, and it's really ridiculous. I mean, I watched my stuff like a hawk once I realized that stuff was disappearing that my mom didn't want to disappear. But you know, she didn't feel well because she hasn't felt well forever, and I have a really, really weird sleeping schedule, and so waking me up outside of that sleeping schedule, I'm not entirely awake or effective. And so I ended up being the one trying to keep track of 20 plus people inside my house doing, you know, different rooms. And I wasn't there for some of it. I didn't see it. And everything that was supposed to go was supposed to be asked about, and that didn't happen. Ugh, tea everywhere. Anyway, but it's cold here in this part of Texas, particularly at night. The temperature has dropped. I think it was supposed to get in the 60s today, but I don't think it topped 40. At least with the wind chill factor, it didn't top 40. And our heating appears to be out. I'm not sure why, but I'm managing with this little space heater that I've had to move back a couple of times because otherwise it's cooking my legs. And I take it over there when went to bed and was running it. I have to turn it almost the opposite direction of me because it'll hit that wall and the heat will bounce off and warm the area instead of pointing it directly at me and me cooking. Because it's a nice little efficient little heater. It has some nice safety features too, because it's got one that if it gets tilted over or knocked over, it shuts down, power shuts off, and that's a very useful thing. But it's not very comfortable in the rest of my house, which is probably why, on top of being sick again after COVID, um, I'm, you know, miserable and haven't gotten a lot done. I was planning on doing another, you know, playing on the gaming series for beginning writers and stuff. You know, just telling people like this because there are so many times I watch a friend who runs Q&As and somebody will say, well, our game has no classes or levels, or, and I just facepalm. I just facepalm. Because, you know, it's okay to have classes and levels. I'm not judgmental over that. It's all right. For me, I like games that have classes and levels, and I like games that don't. My preference leans slightly to games that don't um, have levels. A lot on classes kind of depends on what they're calling a class. Like Shadowrun has archetypes, a form of template, that are supposed to be pre-built characters that are balanced, but oftentimes those are where they make a mistake. Um, and that's probably where they should use the most rigid application of their rules. And the last thing they go over and over and over and over to make sure it actually fits the final rule. Doesn't mean I'm not going to fall for the same problem as they do, because believe me, we're all human. But it's one of the things that convinced me that I could write a game was reading some games from professional designers. And I'm like, I don't think you wrote this the way you meant it, because this makes no sense at all. And realizing that most game writers are just people like me. Maybe not as sick and horrid looking as I am today, but, you know, there's no certain brilliance to game design. Um, Most of it is a little bit of brilliance and a whole lot of hard work. Um, and sometimes it doesn't even take brilliance, because sometimes, you know, a simple idea can work really functionally. I've been talking to a friend about high trust game and talking about game design, and he says that there is no true high trust game design. And I'm coming to realize that he's correct. It's more in how you design adventures. And I like the idea of high trust adventure, which, to put it in really simple terms, it means there's no optimal way to resolve the final situation. There's no one way that's better than any other. I mean, if you decide to get two warring clans or two fighting dragons, just calm down and talk out their issues instead of killing one because it's doing more damage to the village or something, then that's just as important as fighting and killing or whatever idea the game presents, the adventure presents, as resolving the situation. And that becomes an issue, especially with superhero genre, because the superhero genre, there is somewhat of an assumption that um, punching the bad guy is the most important part, which is really funny because I was designing Hearts and Souls First Edition, and one of the characters was playing basically a werepanther. They turned into a panther, a big black melanastic jaguar or whatever, panther or some kind. And they were dealing with this world's equivalent that I was using, a version of Hulk. But their Hulk was 4 years old. And when he got angry as a 4-year-old, which happens quite a bit, they don't have full control of their emotions, he grew into, a 10.5 foot tall, um, uh, rampaging monster whose skin looked like rhinoceros hide with all these nodes on it, like armored nodes that are basically like a rhino's horn but short and rounder, which just studded its skin. And he managed to convince it not to play with the fire trucks because it started a fire accidentally. Instead, just pet the kitty. And that was such a brilliant resolution. Instead of trying to fight something that functionally they could have fought, but it would have been very costly in some form. They came up with a completely different resolution than just punching the bad guy. And I've noticed that's a tendency in some of the games I run, but not all the games I play, is that for the most part there is no one optimal solution to a situation. Uh, there's no, you have to pick up 8 things, and they have to be these 8 specific things um, to win the day. I'm currently running a D&D game where they have to pick up all these fragments of this um, corrupted, soul-drinking sword that killed them all and put it back together in the hopes that it will resolve the situation of this evil empire and the emperor who runs it. Of course, there's always tricks in the background. Always. There's always something. Now, that might be a solution if they stick with it and they focus on it and choose that. But half the fun of the game is watching them try and fathom out other ways to solve problems than just fighting. And twice, one of our characters, a cleric in the D&D game I was running, has come up with alternate ways to resolve the situation that didn't involve violence. And I'm like, you know what? For that particular character, that makes sense. His saint that this character follows um, is a saint of just battles, of freedom, of rebellion, but for good, for rebellion against the chains that people try and bind you in, and things like that. Um, and it makes for interesting play because sometimes he's made choices that actually, you know, were put everybody at risk, and sometimes he made choices that resolve the situation much better than I'd ever planned. And it's always a lovely thing to see is to watch somebody make a character choice, not a what's optimal for the game choice, but a character choice, and that character choice actually having a deep and lasting impact on how things go. Um, Similarly, I recently had player characters fighting a rage demon that was basically trying to drive them into fighting each other. Not really a demon, but the closest thing you can say to a embodied spirit that happens to be massive and immensely powerful, but at the same time, it's only got one aspect, kind of monstrosity. And the long story short is that they found another way to deal with it. Um, it did take some hints, but they were doing pretty good. I had an NPC, one of the player characters, which I'm never a big fan of. I usually just have their contributions not be there, but in this case, it was kind of important. And since I pretty much understood the character pretty well, I said, okay, this is what he's doing. He's telling you, the worst jokes ever, trying to, distract you from the rage demon and the rage it's generating. I mean, things like your mama jokes. It was like it fits the character. Just you have to understand it fits the character because he's not a singing bard. He's a tell an epic story or tell horrible jokes kind of bard, and it's amusing. I really like the character. It was very different from what I expected. Um, but I like, and I've lost. I started out with like 10 people. Well, I started out with like four, and then it grew to 10, and then it has dropped back down to three, and partly because other people's lives are impacted by COVID and other things. Like one person can't come because we're not playing at the public place we normally do, um, and they don't want to be late because they would basically be gone eating supper or something. Uh, so yeah, I have made some difficult choices when it comes down to it because I don't want to risk people getting COVID just for a game. Anyway, to the story of the people who kind of sort of robbed us, I ended up with this cup as a replacement, the dog dead cup, which is makes me kind of sad because one of the two of the dogs that I was watching, the Mastiff and the Dachshund, uh, are friends and they're moving to another state and not a nearby state. And I like to take care of their dogs. I call myself their emotional support human for dogs because they were so busy. They were just so busy. They had a new baby. They had dogs. They were working. Crazy. Uh, but then when COVID hit, all their jobs sort of settled into working from home for the most part. So they didn't need me because they were home for the dogs. But I love the dogs. One of them thinks it should be sitting in my lap, and the other one should be also sitting on me, usually on my shoulder. And both of them end up licking me or licking each other, making out on my shoulder. I'm like, wait, why are you licking each other? uh, See whose tongue can lick the other tongue before dogs are weird. And my Great Dane over here is, I got her, went from rescued her from a shelter and she was starving. I mean, I can't understand somebody not seeing how bad a dog is off and doing something about it. And I just couldn't. And now she's still pretty skinny, and they thought she was 4 or 5, but she grew. And Great Danes past the age of 2 or so don't grow, especially not as significantly as she did. And she's still pretty streamlined, so she could have some greyhounds or something in her. I don't know. Um, I love Great Danes, but she's a goofball. She gets the zoomies, and I know I've had her for 3 years, so I know she's past the stage of growing anymore for sure now. No matter how old she was when we got her. But a mountain dog doesn't always appear the age that people guess by the teeth, because the teeth is not always a good example. A lot of that depends on what they eat, where they eat it, how much they eat. Because if they're forced to eat cardboard, which she likes doing anyway, um, and they'll eat cardboard to fill their bellies. And um, fortunately, now that she's actually been fed real food, it's more of a I'm just going to chew this up and leave it on the floor kind of thing. But because of me having COVID and because of me being sick again this week, the gaming stuff that I wanted to do, the 101 and 201, whatever we're at now, is not happening. Uh, I was supposed to run 2 games today, and I'm just too exhausted and not breathing well. I did get a breathing treatment, and on top of my normal inhalants that I now take now, because of all things, my asthma came back. Hey, before COVID hit me, well, it's been coming back slowly over the last year and a half. Because one of my doctors who's gone now was listening to my lungs, and he was like, "I'm going to get you 2 inhalers. One you keep at home and one you take with you." And I was like, "That sounds pretty serious," but I haven't used them. I mean, they've been sitting almost full for a year and a half, and in the last 6 months, I've used one all up, and they have like 100 and almost 200, inhales, and you take two, so that's 100 uses. And I used one up, and I've got another, and it's been used up pretty quickly now. But only when I absolutely need it. Because, hot tea, especially mint tea and green tea, usually have a good effect on my breathing. Of course, caffeine does. Caffeine works because it's a stimulant. It also helps me sleep. I'm definitely an ADHD person. It has always helped me sleep. Um, the doctor asked me, "How did you make it through high school?" Because after I checked off all the, because as an adult they can't really go look at you and look at your behaviors and say, "Oh, they're ADHD," because you adapted. An adult that adapts to ADHD and doesn't have it so severe they can't adapt. You can't always look at their behaviors. But in my case, it's like, here's this 15-item list, and I've checked off 13 of them. And the only ones I hadn't were substance abuses. I didn't use drugs, I didn't use alcohol. But he said, "Do you drink a lot of coffee?" I said, "No, I drink a lot of root beer, or I drank Coke when I was in high school." And he goes, "Ah, that's how you made it through high school." Because I did. That's what I took. I took my lunch, and all my lunch was a can of Coke. Um, and I'm Southern, so the can of Coke doesn't necessarily mean a specific brand. The Dr. Pepper, of course, is a specific brand. I had to stop drinking that for different reasons. And they actually told me, "Oh, you can't drink caffeine." And I'm like, "I don't think you understand. I can't exactly work without caffeine. It messes me up without at least a little bit." So, green tea has a little bit of caffeine. Despite what they tell you, unless it's actually fully decaf, green tea has some caffeine. Even though the root beer I drink does not. The brand of root beer I drink does not. But it also helps with the breathing if it has caffeine. Frustrating because I'm not supposed to drink it too much. I'm supposed to drink it at all, but when it does help you both physically and mentally somewhat, You know, and it's not making me sick anymore. It started making me sick for a while. That's why I stopped drinking Dr. Pepper because it got to the point where it was too sweet. And now I'm drinking root beer. So you're like, wait, is root beer sweeter? It has to do with the taste. For me, root beer doesn't taste as sweet unless I get it really syrupy. I don't put enough ice in it, or I don't, you know, usually not enough ice because it'll melt the ice and water it down a little bit. And fountain drinks are usually less syrupy unless they've got their mix wrong. But those tend to be caffeinated around here because they tend to be serviced by one company, and their brand of root beer is what goes in all of them. So it's kind of a darned if you do, darned if you don't. I'm gonna try and not cuss. I do cuss, but I try and not cuss in these things. Anyway, but I have been masking when I've had to go out, even before I got COVID, and in recovered from COVID, because I don't want anybody to get it. I mean, especially now that I've had it, even though I had a mild case, I don't want anyone to get it. I don't want a 4-year-old. I don't want a 73-year-old like my mom getting it, or an 80-year-old who happens to have to go to the store for themselves. I don't want them getting it. It's nasty. It's miserable. And I had a mild case, and I wouldn't miss a mild case on anyone. So, that's where I am. I'm just kind of blathering today. And yeah, I don't look great. I need a shave. Probably giving me needing another haircut, even though my hair is short. I don't like it getting too long. I just need to feel better. Uh, what else did we talk about? Well, gaming. I want to do more about gaming talk. I'm going to try and focus on that next year. I've got a lot of work I've got to do for myself and for others. But being sick from COVID and this has not made it easy because I'm supposed to be working on something now. But anyway, yeah, I have to remind people sometimes. It's like, if your only selling point is no classes and no levels, try and find something better to sell your game. I'm going to reiterate that again and again and again. I have nothing personally against classes or levels. They're actually okay. With the right framework, with the right mentality, with the right kind of game, they're perfectly fine. So your selling point should not focus on that, either having them or not having them. Or having, like we have 400 classes. Okay, maybe not. Let's not go that far. But, I don't want to step on anybody's dreams and say, no, 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 no. But I do want them to be at least reasonable about marketing their game system, that they market it in a way 8 million other people haven't marketed their games. And has been true since the 70s, is that there have been classless and level-less games since the 70s. I don't know when RuneQuest was produced, but I do know that Traveler was produced in the 70s, among others. And so you've got a lot of options out there, and there's evolutions of that. I mean, virtually every version of Powered by the Apocalypse is a class-based system fundamentally, but their classes don't always define exactly what a character does. In fact, in some cases, it defines what a character's personality is, because that's the important axiom of play that we're looking at. To some degree, that's what Masks does as a Powered by the Apocalypse game, is looking at the personality type and then giving a small, tiny list of powers that don't have a lot of mechanical impact by themselves that fits that mentality pretty normally. But you can always play with that. course, my favorite version of Powered by the Apocalypse game is Far Flung, which is a little more rules heavy, and the characters are based on what they do, of course, class-wise, their playbooks. Uh, and it's a little bit more complex version, and I didn't think that I would like a more complex version, but it literally tells you, here's how to do everything, you know. And sometimes for me, it's still a guess because there's so much that you can do in the game. My game has almost been more of a tour of the galaxy than action heroes saving the universe, but there's some of that too. So it's fun. Like the last time I ran it, which was Tuesday, which I was not feeling good, but I was feeling much better than I was today. Today's just now Wednesday, and I didn't feel like running either of my games today. So exhausted. Still am. But they wrapped up their visiting a space hospital that dealt with aliens from all over and tried to figure out who built it because it's so old, nobody knows who built it. And they tracked back to the earliest records and find out, well, this strange alien race that only existed in legends, and they're humans. And it's been fun, because they met a human, but not exactly. He is not anything like what you would call a modern day human at all. He looks that way. He sounds that way. He kind of acts that way. But he's also kind of a cosmic being who is capable of wiping out starships. Just like zoop, no more starships. And there's no physical. I mean, you could scan him from head to toe, and you could not detect the technology that allows him to do that because it's not even technology that exists in reality. It exists at this level of sub-reality. So it's kind of interesting because they're like, wait, are there other humans? Are y'all humans like him? Maybe we should go see what the rest of the humans are like. They'll be deeply amused when they find some of them, and they're like very weird in a different way. They had to deal with an artifact that was blocking hyperspace travel between their galaxy and the Andromedan Way, which is Andromeda. This is so far in the future. Andromeda and the Milky Way have merged. So it's the Andromedan Way. And a lot of new stars were created, and a lot of old stars died, and lots of craziness. But the one human they met is like a cosmic being, space god kind of thing. Which I'm surprised wasn't a playbook Powered by the Apocalypse with Space God. I mean, there's something come close. There's, world-ending death machines, but no godlike entities. But, could always make it up. That's one of the things I like, so, and I like classless systems and levelless systems. I like ones with classes and with levels. This tends to be my preferences without, but a lot depends on what the classes are doing and how. But it's not a selling point. Just like, no. No selling point, no classes, no levels, no selling point that you have 400 classes and 5,000 races. Just not so much. Especially if those 5,000 races are, all the same variations. Because I saw a game a while back, and they had a fantasy version of their game and a sci-fi version of the game. And I was looking at them and noticed that they just changed the names on dwarf, elf, human, and something else to be their aliens. And I'm like, hey, come on, be a little more creative than that. I mean, Star Frontier from the 80s, Traveler, when they added aliens, was better than that. I mean, admittedly, it stole its aliens from better science fiction. I mean, because it's obvious that the Aslan Archanur from the Chanur series by C.J. Cherry, I'm not trying to pronounce your last name, so forgive me. But, and the other races are all similarly, probably from familiar fiction. when I can place it, because I haven't read every space opera and every science fiction book ever written by humankind. Um, Therefore, there's some things do slip through the cracks. Which is weird because, like, Star Frontier's aliens, I've not found an example of them in other fiction. That is, I've not read a book that has something close to them, really. And they're not all that complex aliens. You know, you have an insectoid race, which I guess might be the Pip and Flinks series. Um, I don't know. Uh, Shape-shifting blobs. I've seen in a few things, but they're nothing like the Verlassites in Star Frontier. So the fact that I haven't found something that matches the uniqueness of the aliens in Star Frontier in all these years is kind of neat. I will admit, I like the Starfinder aliens. I'm not a big fan of the Starfinder system. Uh, it felt to me like it was a step back from the Pathfinder system in trying to rein in the power of players' characters. Um, and that's probably a better balanced game in some ways. But whenever you set a level equivalent equipment, I'm like, no, I'm walking away. I'm just, this is not, especially when I seem to recall that the lowest level of a decent stunner, like ranged stunner, was you have to be level 8. And yeah, technically speaking, you can break that rule, but come on, people. You know, a stunner should be like the simplest weapon available in a sci-fi game of some form. Although, it depends on what the stunner does. If it freezes you in time and space, that's a little bit different than just knocking you unconscious or paralyzing your left side or something. Uh, but yeah, it's always neat to explore. But my far-flung universe is not by any way canon. Um, I don't use a lot of canon universes myself anymore, unless I specifically want to explore that canon, like Planescape or Dark Sun or the like. And it's one of those things like a lot of settings I loved from past Dungeons and Dragons just never got updated for 5e, and even if they were just things they released online, so a PDF, it gave you the basics and some rules and stuff. That would be nice. But then there are some settings that, like some of the races that people like in 5e, just don't fit the setting at all. Like Birthright. Birthright would be humans, elves, dwarves, maybe half orcs. Well, and halflings. Gotta have halflings because they're special, birthright. They travel through shadow paths because they're originally fairy creatures who came over to this world and now their way has been corrupted. So it's actually a unique twist, much like some other settings I could name as they've twisted things up a little bit from what you expect from core D&D. But the problem is, whenever you tell people, and I have friends like this, you tell people, I'm sorry that race doesn't exist in this setting, they get huffy about it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it does not exist. The end. If you don't want to play that, that's fine. Because I find it hard to make Dragonlance, not Dragonlance, sorry, Ravenloft, as scary when you have halflings and you have Dragonborn and you have Tieflings. I mean, I understand that from the original module, they expanded it into a world, and the world was an alternate plane, and horrors, and all this other stuff. They tried to explain it. And to me, that's just too much. Just let it go. Just let it be a horror world. Let the world be horrific and terrible and monstrous, and people are born there, and they're not these weird races that have been added to D&D. I mean, I have a hard time a little bit with elves and dwarves. I think we could probably replace those with vampires, those human vampire hybrids that occur in fiction, or something similar, like Clockwork Men. I could see Clockwork Men being based on Morpher Forge or Shifters, and then give them give them each a flaw about, because it's kind of a semi, not quite Victorian horror story because it's inspired by Dracula, right? You can add those unique twists to those races. Like a shifter, the more they use their shifting, the more like Hemthorpe they become. The vampires, if they actually feed on people, start losing their humanity and become vampiric. So it becomes a fight to fight the monster that they are feeding a fundamental. And the Clockwork Man, a critical hit just knocks them out. It does damage, and then it unwinds them, and they have to have somebody come repair them to get them active again, and just knock them unconscious. Because they're clockwork, they're not these armored wooden golems. But that to me makes more interesting Ravenloft. If they play up the Victorian horror aspects and take away some of its classic D&D fantasy aspects and make a better melding of the two. But that's preferences, and I don't want to argue that anybody's preferences are wrong. If you want to play a Dragonborn, then find a game where you can play a Dragonborn. I run games where people can play Dragonborn. I played Dragonborn, but I still fundamentally go back to the old school era a little bit when it comes to races, and I like the core races, which were, dwarf, elf, halfling, human, not even half orc, just dwarf, elf, halfling, human. Because I go back that far, I've been playing games that long. As you can tell how I look, gray old man. So it's funny because most of my gray hair is right here. Anyway, I appreciate talking to y'all and just letting me vent a little bit about being sick. I'm so tired. Probably gonna go read and go to bed. The nap earlier doesn't help me sleep later though. Oh, it's frustrating. But at least hopefully I'll be warm because I have a 120-pound bed warmer. Sadly, not a human girl, human woman. It's a dog, but the heat is heat, Of course, I know what winter does to people. There are going to be a lot of COVID babies coming out for a little while. If you watch, there's going to be COVID babies. They're not going to necessarily have COVID, but they're going to be born because people were stuck together during COVID. So, we're going to have a little bit of a baby boom again. It's kind of frightening when you think about it. But, and I wanted to say something here. I don't care your gender. I don't care your skin color. I want to say pelt color because, pelt color or skin color. I don't care if you're LGBTA plus along that line or circle or whatever it is. But you matter, you're loved, and God bless. And Merry Christmas. And if you're not into Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. It's late. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't do a video during more traditional Hanukkah. And if you have chosen to follow the African festival time of Kwanzaa, happy Kwanzaa. Because, everybody deserves a holiday and they don't have cultures to look back to. I mean, Christmas is still somewhat of a constructed holiday that we've made. It's just the time we celebrate something specific. If you're pagan and have Festivus or solstice, whatever, be blessed. Be truly, truly blessed. I hope you don't get COVID. I really significantly hope you don't get COVID. And I will put that in my prayers because I am a Christian. But I kind of love everybody because that's kind of what I was taught. to do, is treat everybody with respect. Didn't start out that way when I was in my 20s, but now that I'm 48 and declining, you know, I get the point I'm trying to be taught. I get it a lot more. All the stuff that differs us from other humans are not as important as what we have in common with other humans. Because when we stop recognizing our commonalities, stop being empathetic with one another, that we do the most harm. Don't harm people. Love them, bless them, accept them. I would give a great deal to have kids. And if one of them turned out transgender or gay, I would just be happy to have a child. I'd be like, yay! And they'd be like, what? I thought you were going to be worried. Why should I be worried? I'm happy you're alive. I'm happy I have a kid. You know, I'm the crazy old uncle for most people, but still, if I had the kids, you know, it would have been nice. I wouldn't have cared. I hope they have all their fingers and toes. I would be attracted to aquatic living like an amphibian, you know. I'd totally go for a child like Namor, you know, Atlantis. Uh, anyway, as I said, blessings. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. I hope you know some joy. I hope you avoid this illness or whatever other illness is coming up. Smack it around.